This has now bled into Valorant, though, because what happened is, because of the situation Stewie2k's in, and by the way, like I said, even behind the scenes, this has sort of been spread, that, like, I imagine a lot of orgs are sort of like, I don't know about this guy, because if you don't know, just before that, last year, he was in Team Liquid, and he essentially might have gotten people kicked out of that team, and might have gotten coaches fired, and it's a whole bloody drama. So anyway, the problem is, like a lot of people in the last year and a half, this is the irrelevant point, people in CSGO, they're not like on this show, Gio, they don't know what I've been saying for the last, like, 5 episodes, like, that whole era, if you were just a good CSGO player, like, welcome to Valorant, here's your contract. That doesn't really exist as far as I can tell. Like, maybe if you're a coach or IGL, like I said, you might have some extra value. But like basically the deals of 2020 that people are thinking of, the Nitros and the Automatics and the Wardells, that's not happening anymore. But the problem is in CSGO, everyone thinks it is, because they all think, like these comments we're about to get into, they think Valorant is like the kids' table, and anyone who was vaguely good at CSGO can instantly not only come into the game, but probably be the best player. So basically, Stewie2k was caught on stream, when Wardell's stream, having a chat with him through Steam, which also is a notorious thing in CSGO, that for some reason people cannot fucking figure out streamer mode and just keep the Steam box on the other monitor. But anyway, whatever. I think at this point they almost do it on purpose, because the incompetence is so outrageous. So anyway, he's caught him in his whole text chat, and they're not even, this is why it's so stupid, they're not even just like, because they're obviously not meant to be on stream, they're not holding any punches back, they're just straight up saying like, yeah, there's like no skill in Valorant, and so it's really just about thinking. And then first of all, I already found it hilarious, because it's two people I consider fairly dumb having a discussion about how easy thinking is, but leave that to one side. I want to trigger myself. So anyway, I thought this would be an interesting topic, because like I said, there's a bunch of topics it leans into there. Like, one, can CSGO people just come over to Valorant still? Two, how much skill is there in Valorant? What's the game like compared to CSGO? I don't even think the idea, is it even relevant that we treat it as like sort of the dropout class of bloody CSGO? Like, that's a bit of it's kind of weird that that's still the take. So Gio, you were interested in this part of the drama, like you said. What did you think of the Wardell angle in this league?
So I'll be honest, a lot of the reason why I was interested in it, and I did do a tweet about this, is I take a real issue, and this bleeds into a slightly different problem that was really prevalent in Rainbow Six. But I take a real issue of people who decide to enter into some endeavor that they want to pursue professionally and take whatever opportunity they can to talk about how bad it is, or how shit it is, or how shit you have to be good at it. And the problem in Rainbow Six that was parallel was that a lot of players would talk about how awful the game is. And it's like, no one's fucking making you be here. Like, but you're an ambassador for this, and this is supposed to be your dream, and this is supposed to be what you dedicate your whole life to. What the fuck does it say about the players and the attitudes of the players if this is what is being espoused by them, right? And so that was my first thought, was at the end of the day, I don't really care enough about like specifically that Wardell said it or what it was he said. I just care that it seems to always be a thing that something comes up where players will take an opportunity to just talk about how shit it is. And the thing that is exceptionally irritating about this example is that Wardell hasn't fucking won anything in Valorant. So it's like, you're sitting there and you're talking about how brain dead everybody else is and how you need no skill to be good at the game. But I don't want to go as far as to say you're not good at the game, because he clearly has individual skill. But what have you achieved? You know, if it were like fucking, I don't know, like CNED or Ye who were saying it, I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but at least they would have some soapbox to stand on. And that's the thing that really irritates me above anything else, because when I actually first saw the screenshot, it was when George Geddes tweeted it, and I didn't register that it was Stewie2k in the screenshot, because he tweeted it from the perspective of Wardell is saying this, right? Sure. So for me, I didn't even consider the Stewie aspect of it until I then watched the video by Richard. But like, I saw it and I just was like, this is just sad. It just makes me sad that like, these are people who claim to dedicate their whole lives to competition and really, really care, and this is what they want to achieve. And this is, when you think no one's looking, this is how you talk about it. Because there were a lot of people who responded to my tweet being like, it's a private conversation. Like, he can say what he wants in private. Yeah, he can. It's not, you know, it's the fact that he felt the need to say it in private is the sad thing. I don't really care what the exact words that came out of his mouth or out of his keyboard were. It makes me sad that this is the attitude that is prevalent in esports. It's not unique to Valorant. It's not unique to any game. It is an attitude that I have seen like kind of permeate through any game that I've worked in. And I think like if you went into sports and you were looking at athletes like a similar age, like at this sort of like early 18 to 21, that's the age where athletes get drafted. Right, if we're talking about American sports, anyway,
Sure.
that's the age at which athletes get drafted. That's you get caught saying that everyone else is shit at what they do and that no skill is involved. Your entire career ends there. You don't get drafted. You don't get picked up by a team. You don't get your opportunity to go and be like some insane player. Maybe one in a million who is just so exceptional that they can't be ignored might, but it ends there. Right? And I feel like it is such a major part of sportsmanship and therefore being part of a sport to publicly, whether it is in a private conversation or not, it is, as soon as it comes out of your mouth, it can be public. But for your opinions that you express to have a certain amount of respect for your opponents, whether you are on stage or not. And that's what really fucked me off about this thing, is that like, ultimately, if Wardell doesn't like achieve anything in Valorant, and I really don't like, we can go on to the next bit in a second afterwards. I really don't think Stewie2k is going to achieve anything in Valorant because I do think it's too late. And as Richard pointed out, he's never even reached Radiant in the game. But like that stuff aside, I don't really give a shit how far Wardell goes, because that's for him to prove to himself and the rest of the world. Like, that's not really my concern, but it is my concern that this is a scene that I really care about, and there are players, and too many players, not all players, but too many players who feel this same way. And I don't think that I know I'm going on for a while, but I don't think that it even comes from a place of them not caring. I think that it comes from a place of deflecting when they haven't proven what they want to prove. Like, I think that's the thing. And the reason I think that is because I, in the past, have definitely been a very prideful person who does the exact same fucking thing. Like, I've seen it in myself in the past. So it's very easy to recognize when you can see that in people. And it's like, the people who are competing at the really, really top level and are getting results are not the people you see saying this stuff. But there is a real problem, and I think it comes from gaming culture in general. I don't think it is something that comes from esports endemically, is you go into a solo queue or whatever, and people always want to blame everyone else. And there is no accountability for when you are good and when you are bad. And that breeds in esports, because that's when you're actually getting into like competition. And again, there's too much value placed culturally on your self-worth as a player if you do or don't like perform well in this one thing or whatever. And we've discussed before about players who worry too much about saying things like, coming up with his excuses as to why they like screwed up around, for example, rather than just being like, yeah, okay, I fucked up. How do we like move on from this? How do we improve? Right? And it's just sort of like, I think that is the fundamental basis of why people even carry this kind of attitude. But the fact this attitude exists is bullshit.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Listen, there's plenty there you can tag in on, you can jump on. You go where you want, Legay. What are your thoughts on this?
Everything has been said pretty much, but from my perspective, I think this is a thing that you will probably mostly only see from North American players, this conversation. And the reason why I think that is because obviously they have a huge fan base. Stewie has endless of viewers on his streams. Obviously, he has also achieved a lot of things, and
sure,
there's a reason why he has those fans. But I think these fans and they boost their ego way too much, and this is why I think that's the biggest problem in North America. Same thing goes, for example, for Tense. Do I think he's a good player? Yeah. Do I think he's an exceptional player? Fuck no. But when you watch all the streams and all the chats everywhere, Tense, yes. And that's also the big problem for where I see like in organizations that they make these mistakes, which goes like, for example, for the EG team in Counter-Strike. They picked the players rather by names than being really smart and having the knowledge and clue what actually makes sense for me to pick up and how to make actually the best team. It's easy always to go back on these guys, because if you don't have the results, you at least had like, I don't know, maybe the numbers were helping you streams and whatsoever, but I just think it's all ego that the North American players have from fans, and boosting each other is that's the biggest thing, I think. And that's why I also think that happens often in CSGO in North America, that these big names from back then still get picked up just because they have this name, and people still think like, okay, they can get back or whatever. I don't know. I'm a bit shocked. And speaking about like having skill, whether you are competing in Counter-Strike for, I don't know, 6-7 years, you can't put up high numbers in that game. So first bring numbers in your game, and then you can start talking about jumping into another game and dropping numbers there. Because I think it takes a huge amount of skill in Valorant, actually. Because adapting has never been more important than in this game.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll do a Valorant discussion in a second. One thing I would say on the topic of like, I think you make a very valid point there about like NA culture, because basically, like, if I had to describe the basic problem, it's that everyone in the NA scene acts like a yes man. So what happens is, not only do all these players quite literally have like a group of friends who are like semi-pros or like similar level or like slightly below them in the pay group, who basically just like kiss their arse the whole time and sort of tell me, you are the best, you did win everything, they're just hating, bro, they just wish they were you, bro, like that sort of fucking crowd of people. But then their fans act the same way. Their fans just adore them 24/7. Like all you need to know about CSGO essentially is this, right? When Simple insulted me, people acted like I couldn't insult him back because he's the best player in CSGO. Like, there's not even a logic to that. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, what? So, but that's the way the fans are. The fans just worship, they essentially do worship these players. So the problem is, even though in Europe that happens to some degree, it doesn't seem to bend people out of shape. Maybe I would speculate it's because I think the practice culture and the way the coaches are now is just a lot different in Europe. Whereas in NA, that this is why it also bleeds into the topic of our coaches all like, whoa, better walk on eggshells around these guys. Because the feeling is like when people have got status and an ego like this, you can't say anything. They just become like they just like they're at gravity fucking well in the room where no one could say any criticism to them. Everything has to be positive. And so the problem is though, it ends up like this. Like what basically his attitude, because as you said, it's technically private, Gio. Like he didn't say this for the benefit of the public, as far as we know. This is just some like fucking elaborate
scheme.
Fake leak. Yeah, exactly. Seems like, and if they have, they failed the PR badly on this one. It didn't play out how you wanted. But basically, the problem with this as well is I don't even totally believe. Like I do on some level. These two guys, like I alluded to jokingly, then they weren't super smart, mega cerebral players, by the way. Like I could believe that they do think the game has no skill, or that even CS was like, oh, it's weird, next level, bro. But the problem is, I also think some of this, because it's private, is cope. I basically think like, here's the problem with this conversation that they're having, is Wardell is someone who could have been a really good player in CSGO, but never made it. And Stewie2k is someone who used to be a really good player, but now is in every professional capacity. He embarrassed himself. So the problem is, neither of them, if you get the vibe of how they're talking, really want to be in Valorant. Like their dream really would be just be in CSGO, but in exactly the team I want, you know, with all my friends and the top players. So because privately they sort of, their egos can't just admit like, yeah, we have sort of fucked things up, or you know, this is just our new career now. They're using cope. Like basically I know this will sound like a crazy analogy, but I'll give you an example of where men do this sort of like thing around their egos. It's an old school example, right? That when people are in a bar and someone goes up to a girl to approach her to say like hello, and obviously he's trying to like open and just talk to her and maybe get her a drink. If he gets rejected, right, it's a classic thing that men do, where when they walk back,
oh, she wasn't hot anyway.
They just say something like that. They go either like, oh, she wasn't even that good looking anyway, or you know, seemed like a bitch. Or the old school one was like, she's probably a lesbian anyway. Like, even though that, like, there's nothing you could, like, nothing could ascertain that. Like, that's just some. But the point is, you're just in that moment, their ego's a little bit raw, and they're just quickly like putting a fucking plaster on it, as it were. Like they quickly like cover it up. Like, no, I'm not vulnerable. There's no problem. It's fine. That's what these guys are doing, in my opinion. And the problem is, that's actually why, even though this is a private convo, I actually agree with you what you said at the end, though, Gio. This belies to me that these guys probably won't make it in Valorant. Like, this is a terrible attitude to have about the game and your teammates. Like, think about it, right? If you're the Wardell guy, first of all, mate, like I said on past episodes, you were just a brainless AWPer. You were just a press W AWPer. Like, don't talk about the game and how level it is and tactics and brain. You're the most definition of a brain dead player. What are you talking about? Sure, what have you ever done in the game that showed you had some nous? And then on the other side, on Stewie's side, like, mate, you've just failed as an IGL like twice in a row. Like, really? Oh, fucking hell. Tell you what, the joke is, if there's any levels to CSGO, you only know they exist because you can't access them. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you couldn't handle Fallen being your IGL, bro. Like, I don't think it's for you. I don't think you should maybe be commenting on how much brain the game takes. Because we can have a combo if you want. Yeah, go on. Jump jump in.
I was going to say, like, just kind of you mentioning his IGLing just brings it to mind as well that I think, in Valorant, players seem to take IGLing a lot more seriously, players will take the IGL quite seriously to an extent that if their IGL is making a bad work environment, they will probably kick them. And the real reason why I think that is quite a big thing right now is that franchising is coming and there are not going to be very many spaces. So if you're causing a problem and these 4 other players really want to get into the top tier of franchising, you're fucking gone. But in CS, that's not a problem, right? It's like, as long as there is an org willing to fund you being on a team, there is a spot for you, essentially, if you were to really reduce it, right? And that's just not the case in Valorant. And there's a lot of rumors going around about like how many spots are actually available in the franchising right now, because whether Riot have already decided that they want like this number or this number, and like everyone's speculating. But the general idea is that it's probably already been mostly, if not entirely, decided which orgs are getting those slots in North America, and therefore which players are going to be in. Like, what? This is going to be like 50 players, I guess?
Yeah, something like that.
And so if you're, going to come in, you don't have a background in Valorant, like not professionally anyway, you haven't really proven anything, you have a bad reputation, and you can't necessarily prove that you are going to be a really valuable IGL, who's going to want you around? Who?
Yes. Got a couple of brief points to make, and then I've got like a Valorant point we can all jump into here. One thing to say is, on the point earlier that you said as well about essentially like people sort of hating the game they play, I actually think unfortunately Valorant is in a really unique situation in that sense that very few games ever have been, which is that because it is a game that is seen as a game that has, like CS essentially has acted as a farm game for this game, and Overwatch.
Yeah,
basically the problem is people have left games which was their main game that they loved or they preferred, and they've come to this job for a career or to restart their career, or to either have a career or to restart their career. Right? The problem with that means is there can be reasons that they're here that mean they don't actually like Valorant the game that much. The only comparison I could give you, because it's a weird one, but it'll just show you how different the initial conditions are, is actually the game Quake 3 20 years ago. Because what was bizarre was, if people don't know, that was back when games just came out single player style, like one every 2 years. So Quake 1 and Quake 2 would come out only like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years before, right? And so what happened was, when Quake 3 came out, all the pros were people who played Quake 1 or Quake 2. So they all hated Quake 3, believe it or not, because it was just sort of like a mishmash of the two and not quite as good as either. It was just like the premise of, if you take all your favourite ice cream and you mix it together, it doesn't make a really delicious mega ice cream. It makes one shit flavour, doesn't it? That like ruins all the flavour. Like that was the premise. All the pros hated it. But the reason I bring this analogy up is actually because if anyone's not even that old school, they will know that now people call Quake 3 the best Quake. I don't, because I'm a super boomer, but the modern opinion is Quake 3 is the best of the Quake games. That's because 99% of people now who've played it weren't those guys from Quake 1 and Quake 2. They just came to Quake 3 as their first game. That was just the game they experienced. They had no preconceived notions, and so they just actually enjoyed that game the best. So the real problem with this, as we've talked about in past episodes, is once the franchise stuff finally begins, right, spoiler, then the door is completely closed. Forget even trying to come over if you're coming from CSGO. You're going to have to just start Valorant and become good if you want a career. So I think that whole idea that like, it's just because I'm from CSGO, that's going to have to end soon anyway. Like, the game basically is just its own game now. Like, you're even seeing people get really good at Valorant, like this year and last year, who only came from Valorant. They didn't even come from CSGO. Like, in my opinion, like, that whole bridge is like, it's over-exaggerated, that part. We can move past that now. Come on. We can move past that.
Yeah. It seems almost like kind of, again, like naive, but also partially cope to be like, oh, well, I'm from CS, so like I can go to Valorant. It's like, well, maybe like even up to a year ago. I just don't know if I do know if I believe that it's true anymore. And the truth is, I don't think that is the case. But the whole thing was just like, I don't know. And what was kind of sad about it is like, there were a lot of people in like my replies, like pros who are like making jokes about the fact that they talk to each other like that, and I was just thinking, this is different from trash talk though, and this is different from like knowing that you're on good terms with everyone and you know that you can insult them because they're your friends, right? Like that's different to like actually speaking with the kind of, I don't know, attitude that came through in that conversation between Wardell and Stewie. Like, ultimately, it's their I don't know, like it's their shit to like deal with, I guess. But it's just, I look at it and I'm like, it's just really like, it's like when you look at teenagers who act like nothing is cool, and it's just sort of like, oh, well, one day you'll grow out of that, and you just kind of hope that they will.
Sure. Oh, by the way, one brief point you made earlier, actually, I just wanted to briefly touch on, I thought was a very good point, was when you said the line about tens there, obviously now everyone in Valorant's like, oh my God, he's the best player. But I think you actually nailed it, because here's one thing I hate, is because of this culture of yes men, it means if you're actually like really good at the game, as in you've got like potential and skill, they act like you're already like the GOAT of the game, like, and you don't have to do anything. Like, what? Because people did this in CSGO, and it's one of the reasons why stupid fans think I hate Zyrathenia, even though he's obviously like one of the best players to ever watch play. But the reason they think I hate him is because I actually treat him the way you should. Like, guess what? I'm not going to say he's the GOAT yet. He hasn't even been in a bloody like major final or anything. He's never even had to do it under the biggest pressure. Like, he's shown us everything in the other games. Yeah, great. That's awesome. But the point is, there's levels to this shit, isn't there? And I agree, because when I've even heard the same thing from Valorant guys, by the way, that like when I asked all my mates, like, tell me who the GOAT is, basically. Who was the best Valorant player? Who was the guy who's like, you're simple? And they were like, realistically, there isn't one. Like, even the people who are the best now, it's like they were the best for 6 months, or the best on this team, or on this. Like, they even said, like, the game hasn't developed enough where you can sort of have enough of a well-rounded game. You're just the best every game. Like, it's not, like, again, to be fair, in CSGO, it wasn't like that. Like, obviously, it was way more different in the early games. Right, let's jump into some of this, because
you can tell it now, just for the 10th example. Like, there was this jet meta for, like, I don't know how long it was played before I started, but when I started, it was played for, like, 3 months. And it was just operator, and jet was super OP, always escaping and whatever. And when they actually nerfed the jet, that you cannot actually play this ballsy and always have your jet dash available, you had to actually change your game style. Maybe even some teams even changed to chamber instead of playing jet on operator. And I think that's where you could see actually who is actually a good player and who is just mechanically strong and abusing the agent that's actually very overpowered back then. So,
what did you think, though, about this wider point, like essentially contrasting the games? Because the way that was phrased, I find so weird. Like, it's one thing if he just said something, there's less skill, or like the obvious example here, I know Wardell probably isn't the most articulate guy, but it would be to say something like, the way skill expression works through the agent's abilities is different than CS. It's more like, maybe it's like the order you use the abilities in, or like the cooldowns, like whether you can time it correct. That would be like one way to say it, right? When he says like that, like, it's just brain dead with no skill. Like, come on, like, give me your thoughts on that, because that's such a wild take, I know, but
no, I don't think it takes actually a lot of skill. Also, you need to be way more focused, and in CSGO you have many more equip rounds, whereas in Valorant you will maybe get like 4 or 5 equip rounds sometimes. So economy is very important. When do I save? How do I punish the money from enemies? So orbs are in question. So I think like the focus part is, because all 5 people have actually to think about the game, not like in CSGO where 3 or 4 players are playing quite more loose and don't necessarily put too much thought into it. But one in-game leader in this game cannot track all ultimates, orbs, or all timing of cooldowns from opponents, so communication is also a very, very huge thing. I think in this game you can make it to a certain level with skill, but after that it's going to be very, very hard to beat teams like Fnatic, FPX, who I think have like insanely great minds, and it's going to be hard to beat them just with skill, pretty much.
The weird thing I found about that as a take as well is, like, here's the thing. As Corp from Wardell, it makes sense. Like I said, I always thought he was just a bit of, like, he's just like a super aggressive AWPer. Like, he's clearly not like he's not fucking like for existence or something. He's not some mastermind IGL. He clearly doesn't think about the game that way. So it's one thing if that was his Corp, because then the logic there would be, it doesn't matter that I'm faster than them, bro. Like, the game isn't about skill. Like, that's like the angle to make you excuse, right? The reason that's weird is this, is why are you telling it to Stewie2k, who's tried being an IGL a few times? The joke is, if you told me, you're going to hate it, Valorant, there's not even any skill, it's just all decision making. Well, if I'm smart, then everyone's win the game, then wouldn't I? Great, sounds perfect. What, you mean in the other way around, Wardell? I don't have some little idiot like you who just has like 1/10 faster reaction time, just whipping me around the corner and jiggle me instantly like that. I actually just beat you because it's like chess. I think this is the game I want to play. Fucking, you can be white. Let's go. What are we doing here? Like, I don't even get that angle like that. Because here's what's weird is, how's that a diss if it's more about like strategic elements? You come from Counter-Strike. We're not supposed to be a brain dead shooter. It's supposed to be a tactical tactical FPS, for fuck's sake. The whole reason we all revere, like, Astralis isn't that they were shooting everyone in the head. It's that they were, like, the geniuses in the game. Like, that's such a weird angle for a CSGO player to diss you on. Like, if anything, that angle makes Valorant sound more interesting in some ways. If it's all like a fucking chess match or like a battlefield game or something, you know, where you're moving your pieces out. Sounds interesting.
The only huge difference in this game is like that the meta will change way more often than it does in CSGO. That's the only thing, and that's what I think is the most important for the IGL or the team in general. How do they adapt to certain comps? And you already see it now. Way more different comps are being played like than it used to be like before the Jet update came. So it's a lot like adapting, and how well do you adapt? And that's where I think Angel actually had a very good take on.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.